Welcome to Down in the Data, an audio series where we talk to the data science and analytics staff of the Indiana Department of Correction and learn how they use data to solve problems.
Hello again. My name is Chris Covey, and I am pleased to bring you another episode of Down in the Data. In a previous episode, we learned a little about the Indiana Department of Correction data analytics team. You remember Eric?
Yeah. I am Eric Ballinger. I am the Director of Data Science and Analytics for the Indiana Department of Correction.
And Benjamin?
I'm Benjamin Covington. I'm an operation analyst for the Data Science and Analytics Division.
Well, this episode was recorded at the 2023 Corrections Technology Association Conference. In this episode, we'll dive a little deeper into the Indiana Department of Correction data analysis team and the behavior models that they developed to reduce assaults. All right, press the red button again.
Okay, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
So who are you?
Okay, so I am Sarah Shelley. I am the Chief Digital Officer for the Department of Correction, and that means I'm over technology as well as data science analytics, kind of the person who kind of tries to coordinate those efforts. And so I've been with the department for 16 years, kind of coming up through just general data analytics. If you know the difference between those, very descriptive, very kind of the more boring side of things. And I then kind of went into legislative services and did that for a little while. Got started the data science group, and then blended those two together, and then also picked up technology. So that is kind of who I am in a nutshell.
Thank you. So you said data science, data analytics. I mean, you said you started the
data science team. Yep.
Data science team.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen?
So funny story is that I was looking around. I had been involved in a pretty big project and knew that I wanted to do something a little more. Mm-hmm. And so I let people know that was what I was wanting to do, and they said, maybe what can we do to keep you? And I said, well, keep me involved in this portion of things. And they said, well, we can definitely tease that off. That group's too busy anyways. The data analytics group was too busy anyways. So, kind of folded that into my legislative job. Actually, it was legislative services and data science for a little while.
That's a great pairing.
Yeah.
That's a great pairing. How'd you get into the data science part of it? Well, first, What is your definition of data science?
So for me, data science is taking a bunch of information from a bunch of different places and trying to make insights with it, as opposed to just reporting out information from just general sources. So non-standard data information systems is kind of what I kind of think differentiates it, as well as just unique data insights. So it's kind of what I think differentiates it.
So one of the first and one of the major projects that Data Science and Analytics has worked on and continues to work on, and we're actually going to end up with version 3-ish, is the assault model. And that is really the birth of data science at IDOC. And that was, you, and someone no longer works for the DOC, so we're not going to talk about him. Because he can't get permission. And that's not that
right.
No, we're not disavowing him.
He was a big part of it as well. Yeah, no, definitely we had kind of a string of pretty bad assaults against our staff. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, we were all pretty concerned about it, but there was a picture that our Deputy Commissioner of Operations came over and showed us, and we were just, horrified. This person spent an extended period in the hospital for a pretty serious assault. And so we just kind of sat down and we were like, right now we're going to give them kind of something that they can use, that they, that we just currently have, just very data analytics side of things, right? So give us a list of things, and you can do some insights on it possibly. And so we gave him a list of people that had prior staff assaults, which, I mean, we all know who has assaulted our staff before. That's not, there's no insight to be had there. You're already watching those people for the most part. And
really, from when I've looked at it later, the interesting part is that if someone assaults a staff member, they usually do it exactly once. So knowing who assaulted a staff member previously isn't actually all that helpful.
No.
Which is counterintuitive, because you think once they start down that path, they're going to keep going. And it really comes down to anyone who assaults a staff member more than once. Once they hit 2 and 3 and say, "Oh, that guy, he is clearly okay with that."
And I think the thing that we wanted to do was actually stop assaults. Like, it's great to have a list of people who had actually assaulted somebody before. I mean, that is important to know. But we wanted to actually stop it before it could ever make it to a list, right? So we had gotten some software through SAS, through a grant, that we hadn't actually been able to use. And so we decided, hey, maybe this is a good opportunity to use that. So that thing that we haven't used before. And just kind of sat down and started talking through what we thought was important. So the other individual that was part of that conversation had a very kind of different background than myself. I'm the criminal justice practitioner. He's very much got a business background, and so that kind of brought some unique kind of ways of looking at things. So we kind of, through discussions, came up with a kind of draft model that we took results to the central office leadership and said, this is kind of what we're thinking we want to do, and this is kind of the results that we can get and how much we think we can capture with that model, and what do you think we need to do to refine it. Funnily enough, some of the things that they really wanted us to focus on, like STG affiliation, security threat group affiliation, what didn't matter. Like we were effectively controlling that type of behavior through policy and procedure that we had in place. So it didn't matter, which was, I think, interesting as well, and it helped us kind of sell things. Because some of the people were very like, well, we expected XYZ things to be super important to the model. And we're like, but they're not. I mean, the math will pick what's important, and that's not. And that's good. You're doing great addressing those things. So out of those kind of initial discussions with leadership, we really knew that we probably needed to talk to line-level staff and more serious subject matter experts. So we had focus groups that were kind of multidisciplinary. We took areas from a focus like mental health and some of the areas that were kind of high in the model, and had kind of subgroups, and then they came and reported to the larger group, and we refined the model from there. Most of the things that came out of that discussion were, we were very dealing with a kind of a person in a point in time, and that was it. The thing that came out of those focus groups was the differences, like the changes in state. So mental health change, whether it be up or down, it didn't matter. It increased your chances of assaulting an individual. So maybe we needed to, give some care. That was the thing that was most important to us with the model as well. And one of the things I think the change portion or addition to the model really helped was that it was now prescriptive. It changed it from just being like, oh, that person, to being, oh, that person needs help. And there's something I can do to help that person, which was super important to us, because one of the major things that we, in that focus group, came out, people were like, we want to put I don't know, a red sticker on their badge, or, if they're high, or, put something on the bedboard. And we were very much like that. You can't do that. That's not what this is meant. You are not bad and always bad. It should not be that way. Ultimately, we want everybody to not be that way, ideally. So.
Ideally. So you talk about this model. Can you kind of describe what that is? What is a model? How did you say you pulled all this different information together? The different types of information that you got from all the subject matter experts and all the feedback that you had, that they said, hey, this is important, but you said the math doesn't apply.
Right.
So what is the model, if I were...
Yeah, so I actually think model selection was an interesting part of that entire journey. So we had an auto neural network that actually was more powerful than the model that we selected, but they are very black box, and we knew people wouldn't trust it. So we didn't select it. We had a kind of second runner-up that was very it was close still, power-wise. So we chose that one, and it was a decision tree. And the decision tree is super easy for people to understand, because you can kind of walk through a population and say, these people are higher, these people are not. And it's very easy to understand. You have this collection of traits, you're higher or lower. Very easy for people to understand, and because of that, easier to trust. So that's like kind of how we chose the model. The variables in the model, again, were through that discussion that we had. I mean, my criminal justice background, and just time at that point with the DOC to understand kind of what drives criminogenic type behavior or assaultive type behavior. I have some psychology background as well, and the other individual also had a master's in psychology as well. So also helped a lot. So just through that discussion, that's how we kind of came up with the initial one, and the initial findings were what we presented to the central office folks, and we then took that back and added some more variables into the model to decide whether those were important or not. And that model is what we took to the focus groups. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I mean, it's a decision tree model. If yes, then. If no, then. Mm-hmm. And then you just kind of, depending on the variables, if yes to variable A, mm-hmm. then it goes over here. And then if no to variable B, then it goes over here. Yep. And that way you can assign a number mm-hmm. or a value mm-hmm. and identify different individuals that have a higher likelihood.
Yep. Propensity to violence, yeah.
To a higher propensity to violence.
Yep.
So if you have that higher propensity, you can know that, maybe you shouldn't poke this person. Right.
And we should definitely talk about that as well. So that was definitely an unintended consequence of this model.
Yes.
For sure.
But before we get there.
Yep.
So when I interviewed for the data science position that was created because Sarah and Brett had created this model that was functional, that worked, and the commissioner thought, hey, we should do more of that. Yep. So listen to her talk about that model, like, oh, wait, but did you consider where they're physically at? Because every cell house has its own culture, where if you're in like an honor dorm, using violence as your go-to solution is not great. But if you're in some of the other dorms that don't follow that same pattern, violence is the answer. That is the solution. If you are in some fashion wronged and you don't respond with violence, you have just made yourself a target. So that was the part that I was interested in, of creating a multi-level model that looks at where they're located, not just who they are right now and how they've changed, but where are they presently in terms of all those other things. And that's what spawned. So the other thing is, every model that is ever created needs to be retrained, because people change, and large groups of people change. So during the process of trying to retrain the decision tree model, I basically started over and using all the variables that they had, since rather than starting from scratch, and built a multi-level logistic model, which is more accurate than their model. However, as Sarah mentioned, it is a black box. So I can say this person, and I can tell them that things that would have changed, so they'd know that. But the one-level staff may or may not care, or may or may not know how to interpret it. But I can't explicitly tell them, you should do this thing because of the last 6 months of this person's life. And that's version 2.
Well, we did also have to retrain the model, and I think this is important to probably tell people, because we had, between the time that we initiated the model and the time that Eric got involved in the second model, there was a major overhaul in Indiana of the, just general sentencing, Indiana code associated with criminal offenses. So just absolutely took away the low-level offender population from our institutions, which really changed the dynamic of our prisons, right? So one of kind of the major reasons why we needed a kind of version 2.
And I will be frank, the program that they used to generate the decision tree gave me fits. I couldn't get it to work correctly. So that's the other reason why I didn't try to retrain on brand new data.
To be fair, he had never had any training in it either. So and I had.
So I went to the thing that I understood. And so we're talking right now, we're talking about SAS, but I was really not familiar with SAS that much. So I actually wrote most of that in R and then translated it into SAS so that it would play nice with the rest of our data.
Hey there. Sorry for interrupting, but in case anyone got lost, SAS and R are the names of different types of software that can be used for data analysis.
Sometimes that's what you do. You have a system that exists, and okay, I can do this other thing, and then move it back over to where it belongs. And sometimes that's the option. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah,
works just fine.
The shop, before it was really brought together, was not agnostic. It was very SAS-centric, and that has not been my approach or our approach at all to software solutions.
Yeah.
At all.
It's what's the thing that gives me an answer that I can do something with?
Mm-hmm.
If it's SAS, I guess I'll do it. But I prefer R, and that's
about it.
I was like, but I'll do it.
Every carpenter has a favorite hammer.
It's true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's the one that gets the results that you can trust. Mm-hmm. That is the one that is the favorite. Mm-hmm. And however you process the information to get the results, as long as you can trust it, and you can sell someone else on that trust and understand the path on how to get from point A to point B, and believe it. I mean, so when I first found out about this project, I was just super amazed. It's like, wait, we can do that? Mm-hmm. We can do that within corrections. We can do that to help people's lives be better. I mean, yeah, they're in prison, but it doesn't have to be horrible all the time.
And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be horrible. I'll just put a full stop there. Because I mean, they're humans, and I want this. And there are charges. They are essentially wards of the state for the time that we have them, and we have actually a constitutional, I guess, mandate to make them better people, to give them reformation. So that, and that's a mission that I definitely believe in. So that's kind of, I think, something that drove maybe this kind of intervention and maybe need to kind of make it just safer, and then also prescriptive, so that it's not being used as a scarlet letter, because we all acknowledge that people are not bad and bad for all of time.
So if we pull this back to the assault model, started off as a decision tree model, if yes then, if no then, just kind of highlighting different characteristics. And what I've kind of put together through the discussions that we've had was, by being able to identify specific behaviors and traits, you can possibly, or have a higher chance of preventing the violence. Can you talk a little bit about some of the numbers, some of the, as far as, it's great to say we put this model in place and there were no more staff assaults.
Right. So I don't have the numbers like in front of me, but I want to say that we compared this, and I didn't talk about this portion, but we compared this to the Indiana risk assessment system, and just capture rate of assaults using just how high risk you are for recidivism. And that is an issue in and of itself, but I could talk about that all day. But we did, I want to say, 110% better than using that particular risk instrument. And I think that, and here I'll just talk about it. I think all of us have risk assessments that are for recidivism, and we're very inclined to want to use those to just as kind of a one-stop shop to say, you're high risk, period. And that's not what it's saying at all. It's saying you have a high risk of recidivism, period. And here are the domains in which you're struggling in. What can we do to help you in those domains? That is what we're trying to do. And so having something, it's not a shock that the capture rate for something that's tailored to, a particular outcome like assaults would capture so many more. But we did, once we had a pilot for this particular, I'll get into numbers now, since that was the actual question. We had a pilot initially at 2 of our facilities, and I'm going to call them high adopting facilities. So we knew that there were 2 facilities who would probably more readily accept this type of thing because they were just a little more forward thinking. And so at those 2 particular facilities, we had pretty good outcome. We sat down, we explained to them how it was supposed to be used. We gave access in accordance to what the warden wanted. And so it could go very shallow into the structure, very deep. At those particular sites, we had a 50% decrease in the amount of assaults at the high adoption sites. So fantastic results at those particular locations. Did not realize that as much at the other locations once we rolled it out, and that may have been because they just weren't as educated in the system as those that had kind of been involved in the project from get-go. We realized decreases, but it was more in the low 30s as opposed to cutting them in half. So, but that's still any reduction is positive. So that is great. I mean, we essentially, any intervention, again, is a good intervention. So,
and then the numbers crept up.
Yeah.
Back up to pre-model levels.
Right.
Which is, again, where the retraining and the new model came about. And so what I used instead of a decision tree was a random coefficients logistic regression. Big fancy term. Which was more accurate. When I look at historical data, my model was more readily able to find people who would have committed an assault. And I would go back even after I released it and looking at every week's who committed an assault last week. Cool. Then I go back and check his numbers. Like, oh yeah, this said he had an 80%. This said he had a 90%.
When comparing so when you say more accurate, you mean more accurate comparing the old model to the new
Correct.
model, something that you can compare apples to apples on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, again, my model, while more accurate, also doesn't have the prescriptive element. Because that wasn't my focus. I was like, how can I get this number higher? Not necessarily effective. However, the other problem with that, just like Sarah was mentioning, is buy-in or application. So no matter which model they're using, if the line level staff look at it and go, oh, so there's Ted. Ted's a high risk, so we're gonna search his cell this week. You have just misused that model, and that's some of what we were seeing, and which is why we started building other models. Because like, okay, so if you have this, you're clearly trying to use, just like with the IRAS, trying to use a recidivism model to predict violence. Like, well, that doesn't work. But that's not what it's for. We started building other models to try and predict the things that they wanted to know about, but.
Well, and it wasn't even that, like, we guessed that's what they were doing.
Oh, yeah, they literally said so.
Yeah. From multiple facilities said that that's what they were doing.
Yes, and they argued with, at one point, one of the facility staff argued with me about why they should be using this. Well, we have to do this because this person might be violent, so we have to search their cell. Like, no, that person might be violent, so that's a good reason not to search their cell. But that's a different problem, which does actually bring us up to now, where we need to rebuild the model anyway because we just went through a giant data thing. And
what do you mean by giant data thing?
We moved everything from a very old system to a very brand new shiny system. It is very shiny, but everything is it is like moving your house. It's like, oh, got a brand new shiny house. So, I don't know where anything's at.
Yes.
Everything is still in boxes.
A little terrifying. Yeah.
So
starting over with your data.
And and I'm learning from my mistake of ignoring the important part of Sarah's model of I should actually be able to tell them what to do when the number comes up, and integrating the accuracy of my model. So hopefully the goal is for round 3 to be both more effectively prescriptive while maintaining accuracy. But that's why Benjamin, that'll be part of his job, is to figure out how to be the best of both worlds, which may or may not work. So no pressure.
No pressure. Just the violence rate within the Indiana Department of Corrections lies within your brain. You got this. You got this.
I will say one of the things that comes up from the development, the historical development of this model, it highlights that there is always a give and take that has to be kept in mind, because numbers don't lie. Numbers, when we meet the assumptions of statistical testing, when we have good data, the processes that are used produce reliable estimates. Neat. That does not necessarily translate to so what. And that's where that balance comes in, asking, and sometimes you end up with multiple models because of that, as a part of explaining a phenomenon. Some that do really focus more on, this is the outcome we need to see coming. Sometimes it really is focusing on, this is the outcome we need to prevent, so we're actually really okay with false positives, more than we're okay with false negatives. We're okay with saying something's likely to go down because we'd rather be more vigilant more often than miss something that is going to go down. And then there are models that, aside from that predictive component, really are about saying, if there's a place to intervene that we manageably can, this is where we should start looking. And you hear, even in the historical development that y'all described, that this process also involves continuing to adapt to the environment as the environment adapts to the fact that we're engaging with it. I mean, putting a model out there changed custody staff behavior in a variety of ways across different facilities, and consequently it changes what's coming in as behavioral data for us to look at. So yeah, there will be a continued complex engagement with this model. There will be continued complex engagement with a lot of our kind of core models that have been developed and that will continue to be developed. And that's an important process for any data science team to keep in mind, that there is no one and done when you're talking about dynamic systems, and there is not much more of a dynamic system than human systems. And corrections is complex at so many levels, and it really does require constantly paying attention to that conceptual balance of the statistical processes, as much as getting the numbers right. Don't get me wrong, getting the numbers right is vastly important, but it's not the only thing.
Because knowing someone has a 90% chance of violence within the next 6 months is okay. If that's all I can tell them, which sadly that's all I can tell them, it isn't necessarily helpful.
Yeah. Whereas if you can tell them that this person, recently had a mental health change, you may need to approach them a little differently than you would approach somebody who's not having a mental health episode. This person lost their job recently, so maybe we need to help them find something to do, or deal with that stressor in their life. That's a little more helpful to staff, obviously, and tells them more information than, this person is high. What does that mean? I'm going to go toss their cell, which is terrifying to me. And they got exactly what you would expect in that they got assaulted. I mean, that's not. Yep. I mean, there's nothing more to say about that. I mean, it's not a shocker.
And that goes back to, you highlighted, it is pretty much the only thing stated in the Indiana Constitution about corrections in our state, that it is to be rehabilitative, not punitive. Yep. And I am all for focusing on specific outcomes. I don't want assaults to happen. I don't want people to experience the effects of those assaults. But failing to attend to that other side of what got us there is failing to attend to things that will matter later as well. We don't keep the majority of people forever.
99% of them will go home.
So it becomes part of a public safety issue that we attend to what is going on in our residents, that we can help intervene with, that not only helps lower the odds of an assault while they are a ward of the state, but when they are a returning citizen. It is, to a reasonable degree, tied together.
So if you're looking at a person that has an assessment level of, say, 20 for violence.
Okay.
And then we're going along, and then all of a sudden that jumps up to 70. Your question is not, what can we do to prevent it to go to 90? It's, why is there a change?
Yes.
And then you're just using this model to highlight and bring awareness to a change in a person's behavior that you can then effectively engage and bring that number back down, possibly.
Yep. Well said. Yes. Exactly.
I dig it.
Me too.
And Benjamin, I really like your discussion on how the model keeps needing to be changed and being updated. I mean, one, that's great for, job security.
For sure.
but it also goes to the fact that you guys were saying that when you institute something, it's kind of like time travel. You're messing with the outcome, and as soon as the outcome changes, then you have to change the predictive factors.
One description of data science that I've heard is that it doesn't predict the future; it creates the future. Because if I tell you that there's an 80% chance that Benjamin's going to do X, Y, or Z, you're now anticipating him to do that, and your behavior will likely affect his likelihood of behaving in that way. Specifically thinking about in either direction with the model. So if we say this offender has an 80% chance of violence, I can either go interact with that person in a horrible way, such as tossing their cell, and more or less guarantee that an assault will occur. Or I can find out why they're at 80% and get them back back in mental health treatment, or back on substance abuse, or get them a job, or whatever, and then prevent that violence from happening. So it's no longer just an event that might occur. It's an event that you're walking into with some knowledge about the likelihoods of going forward. And I've accidentally wandered into discussing Bayes again, and I'm sorry.
Why would you ever be sorry for that? What's to apologize for, Eric?
Sorry to interrupt, but this is where the discussion drastically changes. We pick up on the conversation in the next episode. I'd like to thank Eric, Benjamin, and Sarah for the amazing work that they are doing in carving out part of their day to chat with me. This recording is brought to you from the BerryDunn Government Consulting Team. If you have any questions, I can be reached at covey@berrydunn.com. You can find out about the Government Consulting Team at berrydunn.com. This episode was produced by Eric and myself. I'd also like to thank Doug Rowe, Seth Hedstrom, and Chad Snow for making this possible. Until next time.